welcome to the Create Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. I am Kevin Lieber, and with me as always is Matthew Tabor.
Yeah, and big shout out to Yakov Smirnoff, just for existing. That's it. We found out that he's alive, which in this day and age is enough of an accomplishment to warrant a little bit of praise. But, you know, he's 72. He's still funny. This is good. Congratulations, Yakov Smirnoff.
Yeah. Exactly 2 people listening have any idea who that is. And they are just fist pumping right now that someone else even knows that name. Look them up. I mean, now in the age of YouTube, you could just look up anyone. And although I would really
see the best bits too.
Yeah, I would recommend doing that with Rodney Dangerfield. That's something that I've done in the past year or so. Just going through Dangerfield bits is so good. No one does comedy like him. It's kind of like a dead style. And it's a style that holds up. It's like, you know, that Three Stooges holds up for being like 100 years old. It's like 100 years old, the Three Stooges. And It's timeless. That will never not be clever. It'll never not be funny. Like, you can watch some Three Stooges stuff today and genuinely be blown away by the creativity in a lot of those skits. Like, I know if you're not familiar with the Three Stooges, you just know about it tangentially. You probably just think, they just kind of like punch each other and slap each other and that's it. No. There's a lot of like really clever bits because every skit is some situation in which they're like, they deliver ice. And the whole skit is like they work for this company that delivers ice, and they're like the ice delivery men. But the issue is that the house that they're delivering to is up on this hill. And so they have to carry the ice up like a bunch of steps up this hill. And by the time they get to the top of the hill, the ice melts because it takes too long. So they'll just build like a whole skit around how they can get the ice to this person at the top of this hill without it melting. And invariably go through like a bunch of hijinks and fails and all sorts of stuff. But the fact is, it's just a really clever bit. And there's like hundreds of them. So I don't know how this turned into a Three Stooges advocacy podcast. But watch. Don't write off the Three Stooges. That stuff, it holds up. In the same way that I think Rodney Dangerfield bits hold up. They're just still funny. Him making fun of him making fun of his relationship with his wife, whatever it is, being ugly.
That's all timeless stuff.
It's always funny. Yeah.
Yeah. You know how Jon Favreau was a speechwriter for Obama?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. There's the guy from Harold and Kumar as well was on the team too, but there's a long tradition of this. And Yakov Smirnoff was a part of the speechwriting team for Ronald Reagan in the 80s. There is a long tradition of comedic people throwing presidents, the odd little phrase to spice up their stuff. But for the uninitiated, which is too many of you, the best part of Yakov Smirnoff was what they called the Russian reversal. And it was just little one-liners like always comparing the U.S. and the Soviet Union. It was like, in the U.S., Americans watch TV. In the Soviet Union, TV watches you. That's really funny. That's really witty and funny. So you can get little bits of Yakov Smirnoff, and it'll just make your day a little bit happier.
Well, what's funny is that joke is so ubiquitous now that people don't realize that it came from him, and it was really funny at the time. And it had to do with the surveillance, obviously, and the overbearing control that the state had, over what TV you could see and what you were doing and all of that stuff. Like, the context really is important. And that probably is lost in a lot of ways by people hearing that joke now.
Yes, now they're completely okay with their TV watching that. Now it's like,
right.
It's like, I had a thought about playing volleyball in gym in 7th grade. And then an hour later, Amazon was pitching me volleyball nets. Isn't that cool?
Right. Life is great. It is. Well, speaking of liking...
Is it though?
I don't know. Let's discuss. Because on the topic of enjoying things such as, maybe the Three Stooges, Yakov Smirnoff or Rodney Dangerfield bits, a question
things we enjoy.
Yeah, we enjoy. And I wonder what other people are enjoying, if anything. That's the question of the day. That is the question of this podcast, because I question it. I question what's going on in other people's lives when they seem to just kind of not like anything.
Yeah.
And it gets to a point where they don't like things so much that they sort of just throw their hands up and give up on everything. And it becomes this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy in which everything just it's like a garbage snowball rolling down like a sewage hill. And it gets to a point where you're just miserable. So the proxy for me on this, to give like a very clear analogy here, actually has to do with X, aka Twitter. I don't know how long it'll take
X.
to ever want to call that X. It's going to be a while,
Nobody's calling
maybe forever. But on Twitter, I routinely see people giving up on Twitter as being this like garbage hellhole wasteland of a social media site. This happens every week virtually, where I see someone whom I follow, whom I enjoy, who may, have I might consider an acquaintance or, a friend, people we've had on this podcast, a lot of people in like the YouTube sphere, they're done. They hate it. They hate Twitter. It's just totally toxic and they don't want anything to do with it. And whenever I see that, I immediately think, well, who are you following on Twitter? What are you engaging with on Twitter? What are you looking at on Twitter? Because Twitter just is everything. You could find whatever you want there. And if it's a horrible experience for you, what are you doing?
It's like walking into a library. You choose to walk up to like the worst books in the library, and then you really hate libraries. It's that arbitrary and stupid to me. And it's always that message you're talking about is always something like, oh, follow me over at Blue Sky or Magenta Eyebrow where people aren't mean. People aren't toxic over there. They're completely different on Twitter. All right. No, it doesn't work that way. They are the problem. It never occurs to them that they have any control over this.
That's the point. Thank you. That is exactly the point. How does it not occur to you that you have control over this? It's not this forceful, like compelled experience. Like you can curate. Like another thing that I've seen a lot is complaints about the For You tab being nothing but like horrific, ogreish, like rotten.com violence videos. Do you know what I have never seen on my For You tab? Any of that stuff. Never, not once. I don't have any disgusting violence on that tab. I don't have any porn on that tab. I don't have anything objectionable at all. You know what I have is a lot of stuff that's really funny and entertaining to me.
I do have a lot of those things. I don't have the porn, but I have the awful stuff. But that's because I follow a lot of awful
That's because you're awful.
Like Charles Kahn. Yeah. Charles Kahn puts in the episode chat. He mentions Poe's Law. That's one of those accounts that I've mentioned it before where, Poe retweets and tweets some horrific things. Well, if I didn't want that, I wouldn't follow Poe and I wouldn't follow people like Charles Kahn who retweet him. I have total control over that. When I started on Twitter, which at this point was like 13 years ago, something like that, I was mostly concerned with public policy as it related to education. That's what my followers were built around, the people I followed, all of that. Well, at the time, I didn't see things that were like Poe, graphic, rotten.com, or funny memes or cats or anything like that. So that's just not what I had put together. Well, when I moved away from that and went into things that I enjoyed, things like memes and cats, that's what I get now. And I do understand there's a little bit of sympathy that we have to have that you understand this. I don't. I see it from the outside. But you have a lot of followers between Vsauce 2 and your personal thing. People come out of the woodwork and you can't control that. And some of the people complaining don't like the influx and avalanche sometimes of people saying things that they really don't want to see. Well, at that point, it's on you to not read those comments or not care. And we've gone into that deeply regarding YouTube comments and how you should respond to them. I understand that's very difficult for a lot of people, but a lot of those messages that you're talking about, they are not 500,000 follower accounts. It's somebody with like 200 followers who just can't take it anymore. Like, well, you're not getting any of these randos ruining your day. No, you're engaging in things yourself that bring unwanted attention to you usually, and then complaining about it. You're going to tell me you're not going to do that on Blue Sky? No, of course you will, because that's you.
Or Mastodon or anything else. I mean, first of all, you can turn replies off so that you have that functionality within your control. And also you can decide not to engage with people. I mean, if someone leaves a reply to me that I know is going to turn into a back and forth, I just ignore it. Like, I don't want it. I don't know who you are. I don't know. I don't want to talk to you about this. I'm just going to move on and, not bother with it. But there's more. There's another layer to this whole thing. I wanted to lay the groundwork for this with the Twitter thing, because it actually was the catalyst for me to think about this topic more broadly, about liking things. Because then I started to think about what it is that I do enjoy about Twitter and why I find it to be unquestionably the most entertaining social media platform that exists. Like, there's not even a close second to me. Okay, so then I started to think, why? Why do I like it so much? And actually the answer, the simplest answer is that I really love comedy. I love laughing. I love jokes. So let's just start there. Let me start there, and then I'll get to the sort of hobby thing second. The first thing is that I just genuinely love humor. And that's something that I am into and have always been into, long before YouTube existed, before I got into music, before I got into really any other creative endeavor. Like, just comedy, writing, and humor is something that I've always liked. So actually, when I first joined Twitter, the first thing I did was follow a bunch of stand-up comedians who I liked. And oddly enough, they sucked to follow, and I hated Twitter. Because,
why?
Oh my gosh, because there were like two categories of stand-up comedians, like Twitter accounts. One is they would just post show dates. So they would just use it as a promotional tool.
Broadcasting thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, all right, I'm going to be here at the Comedy Cellar on, June 4th. And that's it. It's like, okay, that's boring. Or they would use it for like political arguing. Like, they wouldn't write jokes. They would just complain about politics. I'm like, oh, like, that is not what I want from my stand-up comic. Like, I want you to be funny. I don't want you to explain to me why we should have like healthcare reform. Like, I do not care what you think about that at all. So it wasn't until I started following people really like Justin Wang and like his ilk, where I found really funny people on Twitter who just post memes, quote, retweet jokes of like crazy tweets. And that became like my base of entertainment for Twitter, was just genuinely funny people making jokes all day. That's awesome. And
awesome.
That's where I started with that. That's much less interesting than what I want to say second. What I want to say second is really kind of like the more important part, I think, of this question of whether or not people like things. I love the NFL and UFC. Love the NFL and love UFC. So let me tell you, as someone who is a huge fan of those two live sports, watching games live and seeing in real time updates as well as jokes instantaneously that match and mirror the thing that you're watching on TV is like the most entertaining thing humanly possible. It is like the most, it's like the meme of the guy watching like 7 Family Guy episodes at once. It's like kind of like a healthier version of that. Like if you're watching a UFC event and then you're scrolling on your phone at the same time, seeing like memes and jokes of what you just watched on TV, it is like the most overloading, like joyous entertainment combination. Because you can't do that with other things. You can't do that in a movie theater, watching a movie. No. And scroll on your phone with like updates of, it has to be a live thing that a whole bunch of other people are watching live at the same time. And you're in this real time community of people discussing it, arguing about it, reacting to it, memeing it. It is the best. I love that.
It's like crowdsourcing the people you're watching the thing with to be peak funny. You know, it's sort of like Mystery Science Theater 3000, except what you're watching is actually really good. It's sports. It's not a joke thing like on that show. And the hecklers are filtered out and crowdsourced to be peak funny worldwide. The very best in the world are jumping in, and they're not there for 2 hours. They're there for the one joke that got them all the likes. And so it's this constant rotating cast of the best. It's a really unique experience, what you're describing. It only happens with a couple other things outside of sports and not so much an enjoyable thing. It is with TV shows. So like something like Love Island. I'm just pulling that out as an example. You know, the Bachelorette, whatever. People will watch the episode and that same thing is happening that you're describing. That people are, criticizing and making jokes and whatever, and it adds that layer to the experience of watching it. People do it with like political debates and stuff. The same mechanism is happening, but it's probably not enjoyable. I mean, it's not. You don't have this ruckus, amazing time.
The fly on Mike Pence's head memes were pretty funny in real time during that vice presidential debate. Yeah. It can be, but you're right. It's usually the attitude and the tone is well, I don't know. It probably depends again on who you follow. Maybe you follow someone who's just making fun of the whole thing and it's hysterical. I don't know. But the point was that I really just over the weekend, because I mean, like think about last night. I'm sending you memes like hot off the presses as they come in. Instantly after Aaron Rodgers tears his Achilles heel, which was like one of the craziest things to happen in recent memory in sports, just due to the juxtaposition of the level of hype about this guy playing this year for the New York Jets to just the absolute
deflation
gut punch, like spiritual gut punch. Even if you don't like the Jets, just the drama of wanting to watch Aaron Rodgers on the Jets this season in the NFL was really high level entertainment that is just gone. It's gone.
So imagine it's 20 years ago or whenever this was. You hear about this movie, Saving Private Ryan, and it's the most intense, realistic battle. It's one of the best war movies ever made. You hear just the most fantastic stuff about it. And you go into the theater and they've prepared this special cut for you. And you sit down and the movie starts and Tom Hanks runs off the landing craft, takes a bullet in the noggin, and then the credits roll.
The end.
And, like, that is the equivalent of what happened with this Aaron Rodgers situation. There was that degree of hype versus just horrid letdown. And all the real-time reaction to that was incredible.
Yeah, because you get the updates from, actual sports reporters. You get their personal reactions to it. And then you get like meme after meme and joke after joke from people. Mm-hmm. It's just this absolute flood and cavalcade of entertainment that you're part of. That is unbelievable.
You get to craft that flavor.
Yeah.
You get to if you want the real-time analysis, you can fill your feed with the analysts. If you want real-time shit posting, then you can fill your feed with the people who just make jokes about football all the time. So depending on what you want, that's just what you get. You can, you like the combination of the two. Well, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people like one or the other. Well, they can craft their Twitter feeds to get that, and everybody's happy. And if you're not happy, what's the problem here? I don't know what you've been sipping, but you've got it all wrong. It's time to commit to the Leaf. We've embraced the smoothness and surprising pick-me-up that tea provides. I literally drink it all day long, nearly a gallon a day, and it powers me through research, script writing, and forums on websites that I refuse to name here. But we don't drink normie NPC tea. We drink cultured and refined anime tea from the Dragon's Treasure. Kevin still likes the gunpowder green called Space Cowboy, and I've sampled nearly 40 Dragon's Treasure teas at this point. Lately, I've been slamming black teas like Kentucky Bourbon and Liquefied Berserk Despair. Scottish Breakfast is deep and peaty, and I smooth it over with Sebastian's Morning Earl Grey, which has the best vanilla cream taste I think I've ever had in a cup. Give me a pot of that with a hot meatball sub from Sal's Pizza and Brooks Barbecue Chicken to wash down my last meal on death row. I highly recommend the sampler packs. You'll want to try everything just like I did. I literally have not had one tea that I wouldn't be happy to reorder. The Dragon's Wings membership fuels new tea experimentation, and the Tea of the Month Club provides a regularly scheduled surprise. And when you order from the Dragon's Treasure using code CREATE, you'll get 10% off your order. That's 10% off using the code CREATE at thedragonstreasure.com. The link's in the description.
Before we get to what the problem here is, I think it's just important to recognize that it starts with me really liking football. It's something that I love. I'm really into. We've never talked about it on this podcast because there was never really any reason to, but I have not missed a single game. I mean, I remember the last 49ers game that I missed was at one of our mutual friends' wedding. And I missed it because he was, I was like one of my best friends getting married. Like, I'm the best man. I have to give a speech. Like, I'm going to
that was a long time
ago. That was
a
long
too.
time ago. What was that? I don't even know.
Like 10 years ago, 12 years. I was living in LA, which is why I didn't go to that wedding.
Mm-hmm. It's a long time ago. I remember missing that,
so you
that
watched
game.
200 games, basically.
No matter where I've
pretty close.
No matter where I've lived, I've always gotten, like, in the past it was DirecTV and the Sunday Ticket, or just figured out some way to watch every game. And then on the Mondays after the games, there are a bunch of YouTubers who I watch who pick apart the All-22 film and go through plays. And I mean, like, I'm really into it. Nearly as much as anyone. Like, I don't own jerseys and stuff like that. But that's
just not you.
It's just not the fashion part of it is I'm not into. But I've been to a bunch of games. Like, I flew to San Francisco once just to go to a game at Candlestick Park before they stopped playing there. I'm super, super into it. So it starts with liking that, and then that develops into having this thing that I look forward to, that I like thinking about. I like watching videos analyzing, people making jokes about, talking about the next opponent. Like, a lot comes out of that one interest that, like, genuinely brings me a lot of, like, joy and happiness and just, I don't know, gives me something to look forward to and just like. And that extends to this Twitter experience that I'm talking about. Like I didn't even in no way want this podcast to be about Twitter. The point of using
it's just a good example
Twitter as a proxy, is an example of the concept of just like liking a thing and then having that turn into sort of like a lot of different streams of more fun and like being a happier person. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's that's how this works.
Yeah, and sometimes it's really terrible. The result is, and it's not all fun and enjoyable. Like when things go very, very badly.
When you're a Giants fan,
that team you follow. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I like football. I watch a lot of it, but I'm not at your level of hyper interest. That's just not it. I have done that with baseball. I like the Boston Red Sox. And one year I watched over 150 games. There are 162 in a season, not counting the playoffs. And I only missed about 10 of them and I was a full-time student and I had a full-time job, and I still managed to watch them. That particular season ended very, very, very badly. It was harrowing. I've actually never seen the home run that ended that season, because it happened when I was watching, as soon as the ball hit the bat, when I heard that sound, I grabbed the remote and shut the TV up with one hand. It was actually remarkable. I had the two hands, right? One grabbed the remote and turned the TV off, and the other grabbed a bottle of Benadryl. And I had 3 Benadryl in my mouth before that ball landed. I was like, I'm just going to bed. It was late. It's not like I did this at 3 p.m.
The Aaron Boone.
But no, it was just no.
Home run?
Yeah, it was the Aaron Boone home run. Yeah, in 2003. It was just a horrible way to end a season after I'd put, at that time too, baseball games were 3.5 hours on average. So 150 times 3.5, I'd put 600 hours of just plain game watching, not to mention the pregame and after game stuff. I'd probably put 1,000 hours into baseball that year, and it ended in just brutal fashion. But I was disappointed, but I wasn't unhappy as a baseball fan. I mean, this is just the way it goes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just, you lose very badly.
The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. That's what that's called. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And, from doing sports too. I mean, some of the things I'm proudest of were actually rescuing the potentially disastrous performance. So if I consider the very best game I ever bowled, oh my God, I don't remember the actual number, but it was something like 155. That's terrible. That's terrible when you're in a professional tournament and people are averaging 220. And you'd think, well, what's the best game you ever bowled? What's the highest score? How many 300s? No. And the reason that one is so important to me is because I could have quit in the 5th frame, and that was a very real possibility to withdraw and quit. And I also could have done a hell of a lot worse than a 150 whatever. And pulling out a less bad score in that scenario, in my mind, is probably the greatest game I ever bowled. And it was horrible. The result was awful. So you get this appreciation of what you value and what you enjoy and what has meaning to you, and for us, we find that to a strong degree in sports. I know a lot of people don't. But we're seeing a lot of people who don't seem to have that in any arena at all. We happen to be talking about sports because you and I both like them. But we see people who do not seem to have any conduit for enjoyment, any sphere of enjoyment or interest, period, at all, anywhere in their life. They just hate life all the time.
Yeah, well, and also, there's so much more that I want to say about this. One of the things that I want to say about this is that I do think that there are things that people might like that they might not have a really fun way of, the way that you engage with it online might really actually suck a lot. I think about this with gaming. So when it comes to gaming, that's another thing that I love. I love video games. I really like, playing them, collecting them, reading about them, anticipating new releases, whatever. I'm into it. I always have been. It's one of my hobbies. I do very little gaming related stuff online because so much of it blows when it comes to the people who are involved in any sort of discussion around gaming. I don't know why, but it's not new. It's not new. It's always been this way. This was one of the reasons why I didn't want to do Vsauce 3. I don't think I've ever talked about this before publicly.
You've never talked about that.
No. All right.
Do it.
Well, here we go. I didn't want, so I created Vsauce 3 to go back to gaming, because Vsauce was originally about gaming. I mean, the original Facebook page for Vsauce was facebook.com/Vsauce gaming. That's how Vsauce started. It was supposed to be video game comedy, because Barely Political did political comedy. They wanted, video games are popular. Let's do video game comedy. Anyway, Vsauce and Vsauce 2 evolved into their own things. The idea was to start Vsauce 3, and the focus would be on blending, going back to gaming, but then bringing sort of science into it. Now, I was on that channel in the beginning because we needed videos. We had to populate the channel. So like I did a show called Video Game WTFs, which was just like glitches and bugs and just kind of funny gaming clips. But, originally we hired this guy, Joey DeCina, to do more of the deep dives of video game science. And then eventually, obviously, Jake Roper took that over. I didn't want to, even though Jake's a big video game guy. I'm a much bigger video game guy than Jake is personally, like in our own personal lives. But I didn't want to do that on Vsauce 3 just because I didn't want to be involved in the community of people online that surrounds gaming. I mean, I think that there are only a couple of people who do gaming stuff who I'm friends with and who I enjoy and who I follow. And it's no accident that it's people like Johnny Millennium, who have a channel called The Happy Console Gamer, where all he does is have fun and celebrate and be positive about gaming. That's unique in that sphere. Yeah, Food for Dogs. I love Food for Dogs for the same reasons. She just genuinely loves and receives joy from gaming and collecting, and that's all she talks about. The rest of it, the other 99.99999 repeating % of gaming stuff, is just a lot of complaining, and in a way that's just kind of boring and annoying, I think.
I see a lot more of it than I should, because there's so much crossover with the funny people and the meme people I like. So many of them are into gaming. So here's an example of one I saw this morning where people were criticizing the combat mechanisms in Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know anything about this. I mean, I know of the Baldur's Gate games and whatever, but I don't play these. And it was this long back and forth discussion of minutia that read to me exactly the same way political discourse reads.
Oh, interesting.
Like the way they discussed it was just like watching somebody argue about like whether you should like ban graphic books in school. Like it just had the same vibe and the same tone in a different lexicon, a different topic, but it felt like the same stuff being translated into a different language. I thought, my God, these are games. I don't fully appreciate this. I don't fully understand it because I'm not a gamer like that. Games stopped after Zork 1. That's it. That was the end. Even when you were talking about the Three Stooges at the top, I was thinking of the Three Stooges NES game and like getting the oyster crackers out of the soup with a spoon and raising money for the orphanage.
Horrible game.
Yeah, and like Charles says in the chat, I did play World of Warcraft for years. I really enjoyed that. I liked that a lot. I played with some good friends and good people. So I don't get it. But at the same time, I do understand that it should be an enjoyable thing. You should like it even when it's really frustrating or when there's annoying stuff. In the end, it's got to be like sports, where even when there's disappointment, you still enjoy the process of it. And I do not get the feeling that a lot of these people in gaming and actually enjoy gaming.
A lot of them don't. I mean, a lot of them just, a lot of the gaming creators just do it because it's a way that they can make content and make money. Like that's totally a thing. There's a lot of kind of like icky stuff. You would find that in anything. So it's probably unfair to single out gaming. But my point with bringing that up is that like if that's what you're really into, I think it probably can be hard to then also find just a lot of like pure entertainment and joy and fun that we're saying is available in something like watching a UFC event live, or probably I would imagine watching something like The Bachelorette or The Bachelor live. There's it's probably really fun to make jokes and comment on whatever happened in something like that. Because in a lot of ways, I consider shows like that to be sports too. I think that those shows are sports for people who don't like sports. It's just sports for different.
It's actually oddly insightful. That's really good. It is exactly like sports.
That's what it is. It is sports for people who don't like sports. Yeah. Those reality competition shows. I'm sure there's crossover of people who like both, but I think generally speaking, it's like those singing competition shows, the talent shows.
Yeah, I like those.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really different flavor of sports. But that is to say that I could see how, maybe I do like a thing, but it doesn't come across as fun in other. It doesn't translate all that well the way that something like watching a football game does. The other thing. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No. I'm half thinking, half pretending to talk. Okay. So give me a little bit more time.
Okay. The other thing that I think is really important as part of this discussion, which probably is its own podcast, but I think we should just bring it up here anyway, is that a lot of things just aren't as interesting as they used to be. And I think there's less stuff to like. Now that sounds super weird to say, because there's probably, more opportunity to engage with things than ever in human history. But a lot of it is so much less interesting than it used to be. And I think you have to be over a certain age to probably appreciate this. So maybe our younger listeners will be like, I don't understand what you're talking about. But the fact is that there are so many things that there was rapid progress on that you could be super into that just doesn't exist anymore. I was mentioning earlier this Apple event that's happening today, where they're announcing whatever the new Apple products are for the year. And
should be the 15 Pro Max is going to be out.
I don't know. Sure. 15 Pro Max G Gloppity Doo 27.
You just outed yourself as a Samsung user, by the way.
I'm just not, I'm not a tech guy. Like the tech, this is like one of my points here. Is like tech is boring now. It's all the same. The iterative progress on tech is not exciting.
That's exactly what Ducky just said in the episode chat. iPhone uses USB-C now. That's cool. I like that. I'm happy that I would love if everything was USB-C from now going forward. However, if that's the big reveal,
a plug,
that incremental, that's right, a different plug. That is nothing like the difference between the 3GS or whatever the original one was and the 4 and the 5. I mean, those were leaps, and now it's like a stylistic baby step. So you're right that progress and the things that are interesting they're not on the same scale. And it's hard you've got to be a certain type of person. Like, in my feed, the two people I saw mentioning the Apple event, iJustine and Sarah Dietschy. Okay. There's certain types of people who are into the details of these things, and they enjoy that. This is what they do. Most people are not on that level of getting into the weeds on this stuff. Before, everybody could go bonkers about some giant leap in iPhone tech, and now it's like debating the megapixel increase on the third camera and talking about a plug. It's a very different thing in terms of being a fan of a thing. The Apple fandom is a unique one because it was a different beast 10 years ago. There's a reason to camp out and get Apple products at release at midnight. And now if somebody does that, I look at that and I think they are only doing this so their shorts and TikToks can be first.
Right. Yeah. There's some sort of tech content creator because otherwise it's like, man, unless you're like hyper into it, it's weird. But, at a general scale, no way. It's just not interesting anymore. And I think there are a lot of things that fall into the category of like, it's just not that interesting anymore. Like movies are not that interesting anymore. And that's not a personal taste. I mean, how many movies just bomb? It's just bomb after bomb after bomb at the box office. Like people don't care about Indiana Jones 4 or whatever it is, 5. Indiana Jones 5. No one cared.
No, isn't it beyond 5?
No, I think it's 5 because Crystal Skull was 4 and then this is 5.
Okay.
And it bombed horrendously because everyone's like, yeah, I don't care. I don't care. It's not interesting anymore. I'm not into it. Jurassic Park 97. It's like, okay, I get it. There are dinosaurs.
Can I throw you a theory for
Yes.
You can accept or reject this.
Gladly.
You can kick it in the theoretical bowls if you'd like.
Okay.
One thing that makes me enjoy certain things less is the volume of information about it and the level of detail about it that has killed the mystique. So I thought of this because I mentioned bowling a little while ago. Now, I'm going to give the bare minimum explanation of how this works. But bowling balls are made of different materials, both on the outside, the part that it comes into contact with the lane, but also the inside of the ball that you can't see. They are asymmetrical. The cores are asymmetrical. So, like, imagine the behavior of a ball that has a very heavy mushroom-shaped thing in the middle. It's not going to roll like a perfect sphere. Right? And you harness that to get the reaction out of the ball that you want. Well, this started to get complex in the early 90s. That's when the surfaces changed and the technology changed on this, but it still was relatively simple. And so was the oil on the lanes. You would watch bowling on TV and a guy was killing it or he wasn't, and he would make mistakes and you didn't know a lot about what was happening. You just watched a guy play his sport. Well, now the technology on the balls is insane. You can really get into the weeds on the physics of the way the balls work. Even if you're a hobbyist, you'll watch on TV and the oil pattern is highlighted in blue for the viewers, sort of like the way the yellow first down marker is on football, so that you can understand this as a viewer. You'll get stats on the ball's velocity and the rate of revolutions and just all of this detail. And it's a completely different experience watching it than it was when it's like, can Pete Weber throw a strike to win? It was just, you were just waiting for the success or the failure, and it was awesome. There's a mystique to that was really engaging. And with so much more information, it kind of paradoxically has weighted down the enjoyment for me. I don't watch a lot of bowling anymore because I actually don't like that level of analysis and that level of knowledge.
It makes it clinical. I can draw.
Baseball's like this too. Every home run hit, almost every ball hit, they will talk about exit velo, exit velocity, the speed of the ball coming off the bat, and the launch angle too. So whereas before somebody would hit a home run and they'd be like, well, that went about 420 feet. Now it's the ball went 424 feet. The launch angle was 27 degrees. The exit velocity was 108.3 miles an hour. And it's like, Jesus Christ, I just want to watch baseball.
Yeah. I mean, I do find it a little bit ironic given that, what we do on Vsauce too, which is to like hyper analyze things that like that level of it. You would think, I mean, you did say the word paradoxically, because so you would think that would be something you'd be into and you're just not. It takes away sort of the romanticism, the intrigue. It turns it into like this clinical, mechanical kind of cold operation.
That might be a me thing too, precisely because I spend all day
analyzing stuff
in hyper analysis mode. And I do like to just like watch football and tune out, watch Red Sox games and tune out, watch Syracuse basketball and just, not move. So But that's because same with mowing the lawn, popping an audiobook on and cruising. That's awesome because it's not that insane Vsauce hyper analysis that's happening all day. So that may be a facet of me. But I also don't see a lot of people have their enjoyment increased by getting into the details of the thing that they purportedly enjoy. Not to that degree.
Mm-hmm.
We want to help you make something and mean something. And we say that phrase all the time because when you're making something and you know it means something, even if it's just to you, that's when you feel pretty good about what you're creating. The support for the Create Unknown in recent weeks has been incredible. Animators, artists, musicians, YouTubers, aspiring filmmakers, comedians, it is crazy how talented everybody in this community is. Consider joining the Create Unknown Patreon. Every dollar that comes through goes straight into the podcast and its community. That means more highlights videos. It means a big Minecraft project that's on the way. And eventually we'd like to manufacture custom piss bottles so you never have to leave your battle station. And being a patron unlocks participation in all of our live recordings. You've seen the roster of guests we've had. Having access to their minds is a unique opportunity. You can go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown or click the link that's in the description. Every little bit helps and your support means absolutely everything to us. Patreon.com/thecreateunknown, links in the description. We appreciate you, Space Cowboys.
Yeah, I would say real quick that going back to Johnny Millennium, friend of the show, he actually brought this up in relation to gaming because this same exact sort of issue in which in the 90s you had video game magazines. You had, EGM, GamePro, yes, whatever it was, Nintendo Power. And you would get some screenshots of an upcoming game. You'd get a screen, you get like 4 screenshots, of Final Fantasy VII or whatever, and like Game Fan. And
printed in 72 DPI.
Oh, geez, they're like tiny and they rarely show you anything. And there's like,
yeah,
like a 30-word blurb that you would just read over and over and over again. And what that served to do was just launch your imagination because you only have this tiny little morphine drip of information about this thing that you are hyping up in your head for a long time until you actually get to finally play that game. And yeah, that was like weirdly enough a worse world to live in, like theoretically, but it turned into like a much like richer experience because you were on your own as far as sort of opening up your imagination to like what you could think the possibilities were rather than, just watching HD trailers and a million articles and interviews and previews and hands-on previews and blah, 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 blah. You're right. Like the more information, it just cuts you at the knees as far as, making you actually more hyped up for it.
Movies are a fantastic example of this, where as you were talking, I realized that I haven't gone into a movie cold. Well, I say gone into a movie. The last movie I watched in the theaters was Fury, the tank movie with Brad Pitt and John Bernthal. And that was like 2015, 14, something like that. So I haven't been to a theater in almost 10 years. But I watch a lot of stuff. And the only things I watch that I don't know anything about are when you've recommended it. Everything else that has any kind of hype, whatever, I go into it with all sorts of exposure to everything from general reviews of whether it's good or bad, or this person's performance was awesome, or this was stupid, down to like this minor character is 43 years old and happened to side-eye look at a girl who was 25. Isn't that horrible? Also, during an interview with like, in an interview, they accidentally farted and wasn't that racist? It's like, nothing makes any sense. It's this insane level of information about the film. Whereas, 25 years ago, you saw a movie trailer, you saw some posters, and maybe you talked to somebody who saw the movie and they were like, yeah, it was awesome. You got to see that. And that was the extent of knowledge you had about a movie before you went to see that movie. It wasn't corrupted by all of this information before going into it. And that's a completely different experience. I notice this when you've suggested things. I watch them cold and I don't know what's coming. I don't know who is about to come on screen. The only people I know involved are the ones that they put in the thumbnail. I know nothing about it. It is a totally different experience because of the lack of information. And it's much, much more enjoyable.
Yeah. I mean, that's the experience that is intended. I purposefully, if I'm interested in, especially with movies, I will not read about it. I won't even really watch trailers because it spoils so much. And now you're like thinking in the back of your head, like, when is that scene going to come? Oh, it's probably this scene. Yes. It's like, you shouldn't be doing that. That is completely spoiling the actual intended experience as a viewer. You shouldn't be thinking about what's coming up next. You shouldn't know what's coming up next. It's ridiculous. But you're right. I mean, this is a prong of this topic that I hadn't even thought about, because I wanted to get into prongs of like sympathy towards people who don't like things, Mm-hmm. And because I think there are a lot of really valid reasons to not really like things that much. Even the things that you do like are kind of annoying. And
yes,
the overload of information is a really interesting reason for like a serious diminishment of enjoyment of things that you otherwise do actually like.
There were a lot of movies that were much, much better on old tube TVs with really bad resolution. Seeing some of them upscaled to 4K, whether your streaming service does it or your device does it, has made a lot of movies worse. It's made a lot of people look worse. And it actually was better when it was blurrier. Now, this is not every movie, but if you take a movie from the 70s or the 80s, here's an example. I watched the original Terminator maybe a month or two ago. The effects are rudimentary. They were incredible at the time, but they're super rudimentary now. They didn't look nearly as choppy and rudimentary when they were on a softer screen. It was so much more fluid. It blended way better. The picture quality has actually made those effects stand out in a bad way. And I thought, well, I like this movie because I like the plot and it's a good movie, right? But it was a lot better when Arnold Schwarzenegger's like busted up face looked real because the resolution was so much lower. Now I can see how bad the makeup is. It truly was a better viewing experience in 1985. And that's an example of I'm getting so much more visual information that it actually makes the experience a little bit worse. Mm-hmm. There's a problem with seeing too much, knowing too much. It makes it much harder to enjoy a lot of the things that were on easy mode enjoyability in the past. So I do have some sympathy for how tempting it's beyond temptation. It's like you're being pulled in to, the siren song is pulling you into the rocks here to complain about something and rip on it and enjoy it. Or and hate it rather than just enjoy it. It's hard. It's hard to resist that.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to finish my thought a bit about the reason I brought up the Apple event. I think Chris Raygun, who's been on the podcast a couple of times, brought this up with video games. Like the console generation leap in the past was a monumental event, going from NES to Genesis to and Super Nintendo era, and then the PlayStation era and Nintendo 64 and then PS2, and like every few years there was this gigantic jump in the presentation, the sound quality, going from like carts to CDs, the gameplay just going from primarily 2D into 3D, and then the 3D gets better. All of this stuff was so exciting and constantly evolving, constantly changing. You were always looking forward to, what the next thing would be. That's gone now too. It's just not the same level. And for all intents and purposes, I don't think can or will ever be. That same level of like, oh my gosh, can you believe going from like PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2? It was incredible. It was like the cutscenes from PlayStation 1 where you were like, I wish the game looked like this. Well, now, a few years later on PlayStation 2, it did look like that. Like the character models were that. They looked awesome, and in some instances better.
As one of those armchair people who sees it from the outside, I would not be able to describe to you cleanly the difference between the PS4 and the PS5, because it's not obvious to me as somebody who does see it through friends, really. You know, it's not like I played both consoles and I can detail all the differences, but it's not that leap like you just explained with the PlayStation and PS2. It's incremental. And I'm sure it matters. I mean, you know the difference. I don't. But it's not obvious to the casual observer the way, oh my God, instead of hitting every button, I don't have to hit the number 2 3 times to get to the letter F. I can just type on this flat, glassy screen on my iPhone. Like, that's a leap. That's a leap. I can watch a video on this thing as opposed to playing the snake game with my keypad. This is a giant, giant leap. You've talked about that theory before, that the incremental stuff and the lack of leaps in progress make it harder to enjoy because it's not clear what you're supposed to enjoy, and probably easier to complain.
I mean, you see it every day. You see, and they're memes and they're jokes, but they come from a place of truth, which is like lately I've been seeing memes making fun of the Starfield character models, like the faces from Starfield. And comparing them.
Too. I don't know what it means, but I see it.
Well, it's the latest and greatest game from Bethesda, Todd Howard. It's supposed to be like Elder Scrolls, Oblivion in outer space. But meanwhile, you have people just like ripping on these like ugly, weird faces and comparing it to, games that came out 10 years ago, being like, this looked better. You would never have done that in like 1996, okay, saying this game from 1986 looked better. Because you'd be comparing, gosh, I don't know, like Kid Icarus to Resident Evil 2 or whatever. I'm just pulling those out of there, but those are roughly the time frames.
Something.
It's like Excite Bike, really Gran Turismo to like RC Pro-Am or whatever. Like this.
Well, RC Pro-Am was incredible.
Yeah, it's like a preposterous comparison. Like it was impossible. But now you can make that joke and people laugh, and it's like not that far off. So anyway, the point of bringing that up is that I think that adds to this general malaise of it being harder to be like super into stuff because it's just not as interesting.
The responsibility has shifted. And that's what this comes down to for me, is that you could get away with really just existing before, and the things you liked, it was just there to enjoy. And now you have to fight a lot of forces. You have to work pretty hard to put yourself in a position to just enjoy. And that means you have to pay attention to who your Twitter feed is composed of. It has to be stuff you're into. Mine is amazing. Like 5 years ago, I spent an afternoon going through all the followers and made like 80% cuts because I just didn't want to see those things anymore. Now Twitter is awesome. I have zero complaints. It's all stuff I like. It's baseball cards. It's cats. It's memes. It's just people being generally funny. There is some stuff that's informational where people whose analyses I respect, they're on my feed. Guys like Rob Henderson, who I've mentioned on this podcast a bunch of times. He's a sharp dude. I really enjoy his feed. It's not comedic, but I like it. I'm happy with it, and I enjoy it because I put a little bit of work in to let myself enjoy it. That responsibility is on me in a way it wasn't a long time ago. If you're into gaming or you're into iPhones, that incremental stuff, well, you have to approach it in a way that you still enjoy. And maybe that is the way Justine and Sarah Dietschy do it. And maybe it's not. I don't know. but it's kind of on you. And so when I see miserable people, all I can think of is, yes, I understand that it can be hard, but you are the problem here. Just like with the people who say never read the YouTube comments, like, no, the comments are, I understand it's not easy, but ultimately it's your responsibility to navigate this thing in such a way that you get something out of it. And maybe that's feedback for your videos. Maybe it's enjoying Twitter, whatever. But if you don't, ultimately, unless you're being harassed and brigaded by thousands of people doxing you, and like, that's a different case. But if you open up Twitter on any given day and you can't scroll down and enjoy what you see, this is 100% on you.
Well, I think what you said about it being more of an active participation thing is really important, because that's kind of what I was thinking about it this morning when I was just generally ruminating on this subject, is that, yeah, I suppose in the past, like in order to just create some sort of dichotomy between like us and our millennial world and many of our listeners in their Gen Z world, perhaps it was just, well, no, I think without a doubt it was easier for us, and we lived in a world in which much of this was just kind of like you said, generally presented to us in such a way that was captivating, interesting, enjoyable, and you could just like a thing. Whereas now, for many of the reasons that we outlined, and probably many that we're not thinking about, I do think it's up to everyone to put a lot more effort in order to find the things. Because let me go back to that gaming example, okay? Like, I love gaming. I think it's fascinating and enjoyable, but there are so many gaming people who I just find really annoying, and their posts are annoying, and the stuff that they complain about is annoying. Their thoughts and like the way that they interact with games is annoying. So I have had to seek out people like Food for Dogs and say, wow, here's a person who is just generally like enthusiastic about gaming. I can vibe with that. I could vibe with Food for Dogs. A lot of people in that sphere I don't vibe with, and I don't want to. So that's been on me to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff in my own hobby.
You have cultivated it very, very well so that you enjoy it.
And I had to. I think that's the point, is that I had to. And I think now more than ever, what's unique about the world we live in today is that it's way more up to people to cultivate it than it was before. Because before, you could just be like a general receptor of cool stuff. Like cool things happen. Cool things happened, and you were a general participant in it. Now there are a lot of cool things happening, but you kind of have to be like the captain of your own ship to sort of, navigate those waters. Yeah.
You have to find them, and you have to avoid the obstacles.
Yes.
Like, music used to be super easy. In 1987 or something like that, you could be like, yeah, I like Poison and Def Leppard, and like, then you list off 10 other bands that are a lot like them, and you bought those cassettes, and that's what you listened to, and life was good. It's not like that now. You have to work really hard to find new music that you enjoy, and it's a real project. It's a project to find what you do like and don't like. It's not as easy as it was.
And then it's harder to find other people to connect to on that, because it was such hard work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's another part to this that this is another theory that you can accept or reject. Little tangential, but there's a thing with compulsive gamblers where there's a theory that a lot of them deep down actually feel a great deal of comfort when they lose. Going back to, like, this makes it sound ridiculous and like stupidly Freudian kind of thing, but their early formative years, they were heavily criticized, treated badly, whatever. And then as adults, they actually have a sense of comfort when they lose. They were brought up to feel like losers, and then things that make them feel like losers, well, there's some safety in that psychologically. I don't think that's universally true. I think it's absolutely true in some cases. And I feel like that happens a lot here too, where people really do not want to enjoy things. And they go out of their way to make sure that they can have as miserable an experience as possible. We see this most obviously in the politics sphere, where how many people we could spend hours listing the people we know who get out of bed, log onto a platform, and fight about things that make them angry. They go out of their way to find the things that piss them off, and then they say, "Oh, I'm so pissed off. The world is horrible."
Right. Wake up looking to get pissed off, and then complain that you're pissed off. That's a neat trick.
Yeah, is that the Eric Andre meme with the gun where he like shoots himself, and it's like, why would he do this?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I think there's a pathology there that is part of this discussion that we're having. And I don't think you can fix those people. I don't think there's much that they can do. They can't go through their Twitter feed and cull it down to the best people and then automatically enjoy themselves. There's a much bigger problem for them. They live to think that the world is wrong, other people are ruining it, everybody else is the problem. The problems are too big to do anything about. They spend no time on what they're doing with their lives. Even in really positive, I'd say movements, I guess. You know, there's something that, for lack of a better term, is called the liberty movement. It's people who like fewer restrictions on things socially, just all sorts of things like that. You say, okay, well, freedom to do things is a good thing, right? A lot of them just talk about this stuff and fight about this stuff. And if you ask them, well, what are you doing with your freedom? What are you doing in your life with the freedom that you currently have now? Well, fighting for freedom. Well, that's a neat trick. You know, it's like defining a word using the word. You know, it's self-referential in that way. So this happens in a lot of different cases. It's not just the people who are really pissed off. Sometimes it's the people who are trying to affect change in a positive way who are so mired in the fight that they themselves don't do anything. They're just warriors for a cause that they've invented, that they wake up each day and commit themselves to. And, you know, they tend not to live to 97 and be healthy, strapping physical bodies as they do it. No, many of these people are disastrous in how they live their lives. Yet, they're so mad about how everybody else lives them. You know, you can't fix that by tweaking your Twitter feed. That is a very, very deep psychological issue. It's just part of their personality and psyche. And there are a lot of them. And they're certainly the ones who stand out on a place like Twitter. You know, what are the crazy stats? The percentage of users who, like 2% of the users make up 98% of the posts or something?
Yeah, it's like 2% of the United States have a Twitter account, and then like 2% of that 2% ever post anything. It's a very, very, very small sample size. So obviously not reflective.
Influence.
Yeah, not reflective of a general population. And you're right. It has an outsized influence on a lot of things. Honestly, including a lot of discussions I think that we have, because, you know, if that's the portal that we have to how other people are thinking, because I do worry about this a lot, just with my own thoughts about what's going on in people's lives and how people are reacting to things, and is that I consider the fact, like, okay, well, you know, what is the percentage of these people that are just crazy? It's got to be high.
Yeah, when you think of those negative personality traits, things like what make up the dark triad and all of this, narcissism, whatever, they are extremely high in almost everybody who's visible. You know, you and I have much higher levels on some of those things that you know, normal people don't. You know, and we're not too nuts. But think of the level of narcissism that I have to write a video and think this is going to be the best video on the 1996 Scorsese epic Kundun that anybody has ever seen on this topic. You have to be a narcissist to some degree to believe that's true. So even the people who are well balanced, I think I'm balanced enough. I'm not perfect with it, but I'm not, hideously bonkers, are still not representative of the average person.
No.
I don't have any self-doubt when it comes to the work that I do. And that's not normal. So we see, the videos you're watching are worked on by people like me. That's not normal. We're not average. Thankfully, I'm not doing anything destructive with these aberrations in my personality. I'm happy that I've channeled it into a way that I think is good, but it sure isn't normal. Your level of commitment, the things you've described, like when you talk about the chicken wing frying period of your life, where it's grind at work doing a hard job just so you can come home and grind at art that doesn't pay, is not normal.
No. Well, and I was told that frequently
weird.
to my face. So, I mean, I'm not, and was not oblivious to that fact. I mean, that was told to me and I accepted that. I was like, okay, well, that's fine. I like doing this and I don't really want to be normal because I find it boring. So, I was comfortable with that.
I'd like to think that people like us and the people we talk to, for the most part, and the friends that we've cultivated online are the good guys. They overwhelmingly are. They sure as hell aren't the normal guys. They would not be doing what they were doing if they were normal.
We've never had a normal person on the podcast. No, it's not possible.
Who's the closest? Who do you think the closest to normal is who we've talked to?
I am.
This is the longest silence of this podcast
my brain
career.
is utterly devoid of thought at that question, because everyone I'm kind of Rolodexing through mentally, I'm like weird. Everybody's
when you go
weird.
When you go through the list, it's really easy to think of how they're not normal. Coffee break. Normal people don't have the balls to do what he does now.
No.
They don't have the chops for that level of confrontation. They don't have the confidence for it. He's not even close to normal. And I just pulled him out randomly. My point here is that we can do that with absolutely everybody. Going all the way back to somebody like Quackity, it's not normal. Most people don't want to be exposed having a camera on them as they hang out and enjoy themselves for 5 hours at a time. Most people aren't comfortable with that. Increasingly they are, but the average person doesn't have the chops for that. We can take everybody we've ever talked to, and they're pretty weird in some respect. They deviate from the mean in some respect.
Because even if people say they want to do that, they don't actually do it. There's a huge difference between saying I want to do a thing and actually doing it.
I know I've been talking a lot here for a bit, but just before we started recording, I was going through a list of channels because there's this little development program that hopefully will help people develop some content, whatever. And I'm looking through channels to see, to find candidates for this. There was a big problem that kept reoccurring. And I don't mean every fifth thing. I mean 9 out of every 10. These are people. So I looked through, the minimum was like 20,000 subscribers. Not because I set that limit. It just was where I got on the list. So they all had at least 20,000 all the way up. Almost none of these channels uploaded. That was the problem. They don't do YouTube anymore. I would click on their links, go to the video section to see what they've been up to. Oh, I'd say 90% of the channels I looked at were completely inactive. Nothing for months, and in some cases, years. So even the people who have built something good, and I'd consider a YouTube channel 20,000 people a serious endeavor.
It's huge. I was just reading a stat like this morning about how few channels reach 10,000 subs. It's rare.
Yeah.
20,000 is double that. Yeah, that's a lot of subs.
Yeah. They've made it to a serious level and gave up. And that's normal in some ways. Some people, their lives change, they lose interest, whatever. There's going to be attrition for a lot of reasons. But the sheer volume, it was almost everybody that I looked at. I could not believe it. I just couldn't believe it. So, yeah, even with the obsession wasn't there. It's like,
yeah. Well, obsessive
how do you help people
can switch gears and become obsessed with something else. They just That's
true.
That's a thing. That is a thing. They get bored
Yep.
and they move on to something else. Yeah.
Yeah. No. That's probably the case, is that they switched over to something else through interest, or it was more pressing, or, I don't know. But it was super strange. I looked at this list and I thought, oh my God, it's going to be so hard to narrow down the possibilities. I looked at 150, exactly 150, because I did 3 pages displaying 50 each. I came up with 1, 2, 3 potentials. Yep.
Wow.
It didn't even matter what, nobody was rejected because their content didn't fit. The content didn't matter a whole lot with this particular group of people. It was sheer commitment. So 2%, exactly 2% were active and showcased that they had potential to take it seriously.
Yeah, that they'll show up.
They'll show up to work for a thing that they've already achieved demonstrable success with. What do you do with that? What do you do when nobody will put the time into anything, and all they do is sit around and be miserable about it? This topic and what we've talked about for an hour are related.
Mm-hmm.
You'd keep doing it if it was enjoyable, right?
If you liked it, yeah. If you liked the process. I mean, I like the process of so many different creative endeavors. I mean, that's why I would do it for an audience of no one for $0 for years while deep frying chicken wings all night. I just liked it. And that's my question. Do people like things anymore? I don't know. Listener, listening to this podcast, do you like stuff? That's what I'm wondering.
It's a weird question, but it's absolutely real. It's a real question. A sub question to this is, do you like stuff as much as you like to hate stuff? That's a real question too.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. But the other thing before we wrap up, I did want to say is that going back to being active and sort of, I don't know, having an active participatory role in the thing that you like being really important. First of all, I think is something that we should recognize. I think that we got to that in this discussion, that is a thing. Mm-hmm. The other thing is like you do have to. You can just kind of maybe choose a thing. Like I feel like you did this in a lot of ways. I mentioned this earlier before we started recording with the card collecting thing, where collecting cards was something you liked as a kid, then you got away from it just because of life and moving around and travel and focusing on like your career and everything. It's something that you've gotten back into. But what I have found interesting about your interest and hobby of card collecting is that it has then opened the door for you into all of this whole community, this whole little network of people who are really into card collecting. And
they're freaks. It's awesome.
And it's so weird. And I mean weird in a good way, because it's fascinating and interesting that you then end up kind of peripherally sucking me into it a little bit. Not that I'm into card collecting, but you'll send me posts, you'll send me tweets, you'll send me videos sometimes of these like card breaks or whatever. Because there's this own little intrigue and drama around the amount of money that these guys spend on these cards, and then the amount that they lose because they sell it for absolute fractions of a penny just to offload them, and it turns into this
We're talking 95% losses on some of these investments. It's as bad as like crypto shit tokens.
Worse. It's worse than crypto. And what the reason I'm bringing it up is because like your interest in this has then given me joy, and it has given me jokes, and it has given me things to laugh at and to consider and to react to and to think about. That now all of a sudden I am exposed to this bizarre world of people spending $20,000 on like rookie cards for some guy who then gets injured next week or gets benched because he sucks, and now it's worth zilch. Like all of that is so funny and interesting to me.
This is something that I like doing, is like when Kevin has talked about quarterbacks, for example, who are just objectively bad at football. They are not good at playing football. And then I'll see a tweet where somebody is like proudly spent $17,000 on a card of them. It's like, this is just the most awful investment ever. And this person is so thrilled, and there's quirky stuff too. Like it's not quite a Schadenfreude element. It's so entertaining because it's so weird to me. But last year, the hype in baseball was around Wander Franco and his cards. He was a rookie and he's a very talented player, fantastic player. The degree of hype and excitement and investment that went into Wander Franco cards. Well, a couple weeks ago, you open Twitter once again, and he's allegedly had really appropriate relationships with very young girls. And then I see on my feed just devastation from all of these people who put so much money into Wander Franco cards. And it's like, it's not that I'm happy that they've been ruined, that their money is just,
but it's not even like he's
evaporated.
A bad baseball player. He's just like a sexual predator, apparently. Like that is so much worse, but it has the same effect in which it just turns his cards into
weird
dust.
To see.
It's such a weird outcome. Yeah.
And just like today where I forget what site, it was like Fans Edge or something, like Fanatics, one of them, Aaron Rodgers Jets jerseys were like half price. I mean,
they're garbage.
It's tragic,
it's
but
a
it's
novelty.
Also kind of funny.
It's a novelty.
Yeah.
It's like the team who loses the Super Bowl sending their sweatshirts to a third world country. It's just like a novelty.
And we would see a tweet about that. That's like a village in Ghana just got, totally outfitted in Aaron Rodgers Jets jerseys. And we would morbidly laugh at that tweet.
Yeah.
Ghana's not that bad. I'm not ripping on Ghana. This is not, whatever. I'm just using an example of a place that, how about an uncharted area of the Democratic Republic of Congo? How about that? I know somebody listens in Congo too. It's popped up on the stats. So hopefully your Aaron Rodgers jersey is on the way. But we find enjoyment in this stuff because we've cultivated it. Like I've cultivated my feed to see the crazy purchases that people make in the card community and think, oh my God, one guy put, I think it was $500,000 into Derek Carr Raiders cards. This was last year. And he made this video that was on YouTube about it and explained the rationale for his massive investment in Derek Carr cards. And then like 3 weeks later, Derek Carr quit the team. He just plain stopped showing up to work. It's like, there's nothing like this in other spheres, but I really enjoy it. It's easy to do. And I don't get wrapped up in, just like in any fandom, there's all sorts of internal politics, whether it's Marvel or Star Wars or video games or whatever. You know what it's like within the fandom. It's exactly the same in sports cards. I just don't participate in it, just like you don't with gaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
I stay out of the equivalent of food for dogs.
Stay out of the garbage end of it, and you can find the end of it that's just fun.
Yeah. A guy named Paul Lesko is a lawyer who analyzes lawsuits within the card community. Things like between card companies, intellectual property suits. If there is a lawsuit regarding sports cards, Paul Lesko does a full rundown every single time. Like in the mornings, he'll check dockets to see about like new cases, developments in cases, when there's a hearing. It's fascinating to me.
It's such a weird niche.
Exactly. It's really strange. And he himself collects cards that are involved in the lawsuits. That's part of his personal collection. That I have
so weird,
quirks in my collection too, and that's his disputed, lawsuit cards. That's always really cool. It's super interesting stuff to see his deep dives. It's not people complaining about the resale price of this or whether like this box is like a good value and what's the investment. I don't care about that. So I don't really see it. And when I do see it, it's so crazy that it's enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, so that's, yeah, the big question here is, do you like things? Would you like to consider liking things? Because the entire purpose of us sort of outlining the things that we do like is just to say, like, this is possible. You might have to put some effort into it, and that's okay. Sort of anything good requires effort, so you might have to put some effort into it. But there's a lot of fun to be had, a lot of things to laugh at, a lot of things to lift your mood, because there's plenty of other things to be disappointed with and upset by and frustrated with, and things that you've expected to go right that went wrong. There's plenty of that stuff that will happen anyway. Might want to consider bringing some levity and some fun amidst all of that chaos to break it up, and to have something to look forward to. And again, I hope that we did a good job of explaining some of the challenges I think that have arisen, like, surrounding this, sort of in the last, I would say, 10 years or so.
I think so, yeah.
I would say that's probably a good timeline to say a lot of this has gotten kind of harder to be like a passive enjoyer of things, but
it's a social media era. That's really what coincided with this stuff.
Yeah. It's made it so that, like, you're going to kind of receive a lot of what you give out. And it's really kind of up to you to decide what you want to give out and what you want to receive. And both of us, giving the specific example of Twitter, have worked to cultivate our feeds, have unfollowed people or muted people, or just plain ignored people that were like, yeah, they're boring, or they just complain all the time, or, that's not interesting to me, what they talk about and what they bitch about all the time. So see ya. That's part of the process. But you can get to a point where, man, a lot of this stuff is just like, it's a nice break. It's a nice break to have, and it doesn't have to be a snake pit. I think that's the overall message.
If it is, you're the problem. Figure it out. All right. Well, while you try figuring it out, we are out of here for this week. We'll be back next week. Until then, check out our Patreon. We are a Patreon and patron supported podcast. Go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown to support this podcast if you can and would like to. Until next week, we will see you, Space Cowboys. Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% of that goes directly to keeping episodes going every week, and the recent support has been amazing. Sid Poke, NRM, Venture Addicts, Weezer Good, you all really do make this show happen. Thank you to the Tots and Dumpster crew, old and new, who save tiny little lives every month. Thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Clemente de los Santos, Dan the Latch, Demetrius Andrews, Erica Farrakhan, Jen Mefisanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Monahim, Natsu, Penny Peddler, Risebread, Ryan Kinder, Samuel Manser, Sean S., Sean Malone, and Tom Vidioger. And a tremendous shout out to our elite baby gang commanders: Atrocious Scuff, Kat, Dojangles, Graham Robertson, James Gallagher, Jeff Davis, Orange Vanilla Coke, Patrick Pister, TCU's personal pilot, Andy, Ryan Carroll, Baseweight, Vinthos, Yeetus Deletus, Jonas Walter, Nathan Robinson, Jelxies, and of course, Trevstead. You are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer-editor Ben Webster, Minecraft mogul Laterman, Discord kitten wrangler Conrad, and producer emeritus Dan Yoshua. Thanks to Baseweight for use of Created in the Unknown for the opening theme. Thanks to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it. And a special thanks to Main Gear for powering all of our PC endeavors. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.